Tom Verducci, Sports Illustrated senior baseball writer, Major League Baseball Network analyst. He's covering the Cubs, Mets tomorrow on the MLB Network, Angels, Red Sox on Saturday. Let's start with the Mets pitching issues here. I think there was a buyer beware with how hard these guys throw. Is it as simple as that these are all guys with Tommy John surgery, and here we are, more issues for them?
Well, it's not just that. It's the fact that they pitched that 7th month last year, going all the way to the World Series when most of them hadn't pitched the 6th month. We see this time and time again. Before the season started, I wrote something about, hey, remember the 04 Marlins? Remember that 03 Marlins team, that great young pitching staff with led by Josh Beckett? They hit a wall the next year after they were pushed that far. So I talked to Jacob deGrom, who still doesn't have his A-plus fastball. I mean, he's healthy, but he just doesn't have the same velocity. And he said it's the innings, man. You know, it's a shorter off-season, shorter recovery period as well.
The Clayton Kershaw situation with his back. What do the Dodgers know about that?
Well, he's going to get checked out. I think it's today out in L.A. We'll know a lot more, but this is something that's been bothering him for a couple of weeks. That would be concerning to me because clearly they've been aware of it and been treating it probably with anti-inflammatories, and there hasn't been a positive response. So, listen, any kind of injury with a pitcher, you worry about how does it change the mechanics, and certainly with Kershaw, who's the gold standard, I actually think of all time, man. I think he's on the greatest pitching run of all time. You're not going to take any chances. So you've got the All-Star break coming up, and as much as I know he would love to start his first All-Star game, now may be the time to back off a little bit.
All time?
Yeah, I say that because, you know, I'm not going to count Walter Johnson. That's the dead ball era. Yeah. But in terms of Pedro, Randy Johnson, Sandy Koufax, the volume of what this guy is doing, pitching 230 innings a year, and that strikeout to walk rate is just crazy. Here's my best stat on Clayton. I think he's been pitching now for 8 years. His career ERA has lowered every single year. He just keeps getting better. That's not supposed to happen when you pitch as much as he does.
But how is this happening that you have so many great pitchers, but you have this surge in home runs? Like, where did this pitching come from? That all of a sudden we're tuning in to watch pitchers, not hitters?
Well, the game on every level, especially the amateur level, is being driven by velo. Everybody wants velocity. It's being chased at an earlier age. You see the average velocity keep going up in the major leagues. So what you're seeing now is starting pitchers who used to be able to pitch through a lineup 3 times are now taking a reliever's mentality when they get the ball. And that is, I'm going to go as hard as I can for as long as I can. And there's no, hey, let me hold back a little bit in the first time around the lineup, change speeds a little bit. No, I mean, it's a pretty much max effort. So I think what's happening here, though, hitters realize it, man. You have to, and Trevor Bauer of the Indians was the one who turned me onto this a couple of years ago. What pitchers are doing, essentially, is the equivalent of lowering the hoop in basketball or shrinking the field in football. I mean, it's still 60 feet, 6 inches between the rubber and home plate. But throwing as hard as they do, what they're doing is they're shrinking that distance. So a hitter has less time to read and react. Now, what does that mean? You got to sell out. And that's why we're seeing an all-or-nothing game. A lot of strikeouts, a lot of home runs.
Speaking of pitching and these guys throwing as hard as they can for as long as they can, what about this idea that let's say I can have Clayton Kershaw work 3 days a week, but maybe he's only throwing 50 or 60 pitches each start. So we see the numbers as you go through the lineup, the averages usually go up. So if I have Kershaw going through the lineup, let's say twice, and then you bring in somebody else. So we're using more pitchers, but we're using them less with their appearances. Can you ever see a situation where starters I can use Kershaw 3 days a week or a Jake Arrieta?
That makes a lot of sense logically. The only problem is pitchers are not going to get the things that get them money. In terms of wins and innings, I think we're actually heading in a completely opposite direction. Now we talk about normal rest. There's actually more starts now in today's game made on 5 days of rest than 4 days of rest. And you see that's what the Mets are doing with their guys. The Cubs are doing this around the All-Star break with their older pitchers. I think we're actually headed more towards the Japanese model. You know, they don't play on Mondays over there. It's the least attended game of the week. I would like to see baseball go to a 154-game schedule. Everybody's off on Monday except for one game, which is a true national showcase game. And then you go to the Japanese model where you're pitching as Tanaka did and everybody else over there. So you're the Friday pitcher or you're the Saturday pitcher, and you're pitching once a week. And then you could pitch deeper into games because you have more recovery. I think we'd have a better product. Will the owners give up 8 dates? That's been the big sticking point all along. I think they should, especially when you're talking about Monday nights early and late in the season when school's in session.
Tom Verducci joining us, MLB Network analyst. He's got Cubs, Mets tomorrow, Angels, Red Sox on Saturday. Why the jump in home runs?
I did my homework on this, Dan. I consulted with some of the top physicists in the world, and there's actually a very scientific name for this. Freaky. It makes no sense. This is now 2 years in a row of double-digit increase in home runs. Now, the only other times that's happened in baseball history, there's a clear reason why it's happened. Expansion in 93, players coming back from war in the 40s, the ball in the 1920s, the lowering of the mound in 1969. There's nothing that's changed, at least to an obvious eye, with the game in the last couple of years. But it started in the second half of last season, a tremendous spike late in the year. There's only 2 years in baseball history where home runs have been flying out as often as they are this year, and that's 1999 and 2000. And we all know what was happening back then in terms of the pharmacology in the game. It is really freaky. It's not like there's a bunch of hits flying around. And to me, home runs are great. I know people love them, Dan, but I would be a little bit concerned. I used to play a game with my brothers, and you probably did this too. You paint a strike zone on a wall somewhere, probably at the school, right? You try to strike the guy out, and it's either a strikeout, a walk, or a home run. You don't need a defense. You don't need base runners. The game is too much of that these days. Too much strikeout, walk, home run. We're not seeing an increase really in run scoring or in certainly stolen bases or hits. We're just seeing a one-dimensional increase, and that's in home runs.
But I also think the velocity has something to do with it as well, that when you do connect, you are going to hit a home run. And I don't know if the fact that everybody throws 95 now has something to do with that.
Well, it's interesting. I do think there is something to do with that, but you got to be careful about that old saw that, the harder it comes in, the harder it goes out. Because now that we do have, for the last couple of years, StatCast to measure basically everything in play, some of the longest home runs have been hit on off-speed pitches. So it's not a direct correlation. I do think, though, what we talked about in terms of velocity, where you got to get started sooner and sell out for velocity. You can't read and react. I do think velocity correlates to home runs in that regard.
Before I let you go, the Pete Rose situation, why did it take this long to get into the Reds Hall of Fame, and does this mean anything for baseball's Hall of Fame?
Well, it doesn't mean anything for baseball's Hall of Fame. I don't know what the Reds people were thinking. Maybe they were hoping that Pete had this outside chance of getting into Cooperstown, and he could be welcomed into the Reds Hall of Fame as a true Hall of Famer. I mean, clearly, we all know he should have been in the Reds Hall of Fame at least as soon as that place opened. But I think even the Reds realize now that that door is pretty much closed, sealed, and locked. So it was time to put him in.
On this date, I'm going to put you on the spot. You got more confidence in the Cubs or the Giants?
Whoa, that is on the spot because I think the Cubs have the better team. But to me, the Giants are the biggest obstacle in the way between the Cubs and the National League pennant. I mean, the Giants, we all know how they play in postseason baseball. They don't have to hit home runs to win games. They're a little bit of an anomaly there. I will still tell you I will go with the Cubs for this reason. I am assuming that between now and August 1st, the Cubs are going to go out and get someone like Andrew Miller. It's the one flaw in this team that they don't have a lockdown relief pitcher at the back of the game, especially left-handed. And you can't tell me the way they built this team with otherwise the best roster in baseball and all these years of waiting, that they're going to go into October with that one flaw that everybody knows about. So I'm assuming that they will get, whether it's Miller or Chapman or somebody else, I'm talking about an elite guy at the back end of the game.
Thank you, Tom. Safe travels.
Always a pleasure, Dan. Take care.
That's Tom Verducci.
The Dan Patrick Show, weekday mornings on Audience.